Pressure comes. Sawyer knocked it out and picks it up. Jack Sawyer headed down the sidelines. Ohio State scoop and score and dagger from 82 yards.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyra and Jack Felcher along with you on your Monday here on the game. That was called Chris Fowler on Friday night on ESPN as Jack Sawyer takes the fumble from Quinn Ewers all the way to the house to secure the 28-14 victory over Texas in the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic to punch Ohio State's ticket to the national championship game. This game didn't exactly go the way I thought it was going to go. I thought Ohio State's offense was going to fly up and down the field, and it was going to be pretty one-sided. But give Texas credit. They made it a fight, but just came up a little bit short there at the end.
Yeah, I thought it was a very entertaining game, all things considered. And, yeah, I mean, look, Texas really did surprise a lot of people, I think, even though they were, I think, the higher seed in this game. Like, Ohio State had just been on another level this season. And the fact they were able to win this game without Jeremiah Smith essentially being a factor, like, he only went for 3 receiving yards in this game, I think. And that is that's shocking to say the least that Ohio State was able to get this win without him essentially. So just shows how deep they are. And that play by Jack Sawyer, I mean, that's one of the plays that will go down in Buckeye lore forever.
I didn't think they were going to be able to shut him down completely, but if you told me before the game that Texas was going to take him away by bracketing him like they did throughout the entire night, I probably would have said, well, okay, well, they still got 2 very high-caliber wide receivers in Carnell Tate and Mika Ibuka that are very capable as well, and you saw both those guys step up and play their respective roles, and funny enough, it was Travion Henderson that ended up having the 1 receiving touchdown right before halftime that he took 75 yards to the house. That, to me, and I know the Sawyer touchdowns obviously what sealed it, that was the biggest moment of the game to me, because Texas had just tied the game up at 7 right before the half there, and Ohio State, only a handful of seconds left. They were just trying to get a feel, right? You dump the ball off Travion Henderson, see if you can get a couple yards to kind of set yourself up for those last couple seconds of the half, and then he takes the thing to the house. And that was such a big swing of momentum because it felt like Texas had finally kind of grabbed the momentum a little bit. They go down there and score a touchdown themselves, and then you take it right back for the half.
Yeah, I mean, look, it definitely felt like the momentum was – it felt like Texas was back in that game for sure. But that 75-yard touchdown by Henderson, I mean, that is just – that's got to be a backbreaker right there. Like right before the half, right after you seemingly got the game back in your favor. But give a lot of credit to Ohio State, man. Like, even when they didn't play their best at times, I mean, this is more than enough to get the job done. And to be able to – play the way they did on defense, shutting down Quinn Ewers and that offense at the end of the game, like keeping them out of the end zone and getting that stop with the Sawyer fumble recovery touchdown. I mean, that's a huge play right there, and definitely something you needed, to advance to the national title game. We
have to talk about, you would not have been in the position for Ewers to likely fumble that ball had they not called the toss sweep play that lost them, 6 or 7 yards?
Yeah.
Texas has a big offensive line, a strong offensive line. And I know they hadn't been running the ball all that well really in their, the last 2 playoff games. They didn't really run the ball well against Arizona State when they lost to Georgia twice this season, didn't run the ball well in those games, and overall didn't run the ball super well on Friday night either. But you got 1st and goal at the 1. And, again, it's 4-down territory. You're already down 7 points. You've got 4 opportunities to get 1 yard. And, look, Steve Sarkisian is a brilliant offensive mind, but I don't know what possessed him to try and call a toss sweep there instead of just going 4 runs or 4 sneaks straight up the middle.
You went straight run up the middle, like running back up the gut on that 1st down play at the 1. Didn't get anything. Okay. You don't try it again. You decide to go toss sweep, and in the back of your mind it might not work out necessarily because if someone is coming off the edge quick enough, they could potentially blow that play up, and that's exactly what happened. And now you're in a position that's 2nd down. Now you're in a 3rd and 8 at the 8-yard line, and a field goal does you no good here. You have to get in the end zone, and you throw the ball incomplete, whatever, and then Ewers, gets sacked, and it becomes a strip sack. And Just a real bad sequence of plays.
Especially considering, and they ended up with 9 total tackles for losses, but at that point before the toss sweep, they would have had 7. You had an Ohio State defense that was routinely in your backfield a lot that night. So again, I don't think you should take the chance with how much speed they had, around the outside that was able to contain. I think it was Wisner that took the toss sweep, and then you're set to where you have to throw the ball, and boom, the rest is history. And then Jack Sawyer ends up, taking it to the house and cementing himself in Ohio State lore after that.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's the play that we're going to be talking about for a while there, and it's it might not have look. If you're Texas and you don't get it there, but you're running it up the gut on those 4 downs there to give yourself a chance to get into the end zone at the 1, okay, that's a different story. Like, you just got beat by a brick wall, essentially. But to kind of lose the game the way you did, it just felt like it was on Texas there. Like, you shouldn't have even been in that situation there. You should have been just going right up the gut, and you could have gotten into the end zone for sure. Like, I refuse to believe 4 times running it up the middle on with 1 yard to go. You got to be able to get it at least once.
Yeah, and again, that's something that's going to haunt them throughout the entire offseason. But now we get Ohio State and Notre Dame for the national championship coming up a week from today on Monday, January the 20th. Also be MLK Day, by the way. And man, this is an interesting matchup. I think about it from this perspective, right? Look, every fan base or every team has fan bases that don't like them, right? So there's always going to be a degree of hatred towards one team or whatever in a game like this. I can't think of a national championship matchup that features 2 teams that are more nationally hated than Ohio State and Notre Dame.
Yeah, it's 2 of the powerhouses in college football that no one likes. But for me, I'm a fan of it. Like, I want to see the best teams out there, and I feel like this is a really cool matchup, especially considering the last time they played last season, which is now technically 2 seasons ago, 2023. That game coming down to the wire out in South Bend, and
where Ryan Day was yelling at
Lou Holtz freaking out. I wonder if Lou's going to be at the game on Monday, but I'm really interested in seeing how this one goes. I think it's a great matchup. I think Ohio State, I haven't looked at the lines yet, but I'm assuming that's going to be Ohio State favored by at least a touchdown. But Notre Dame, sneaky good. They got to obviously continue to get Jeremiah Love healthy because you definitely need him out there in the backfield. But Riley Leonard, the way the defense plays and forcing turnovers is such a big key for them. If they're able to force some turnovers on Will Howard and kind of do what Texas did, not making Jeremiah Smith a factor, maybe you have a chance. But I think Ohio State right now probably gets the edge for a lot of people.
And I know this is the first year of the 12-team playoff, but I look at this matchup, and again, you may not like either one of these teams, and you're probably in the majority if you are one of those people, but you can't deny that both teams earn their way to playing for the national championship. And Notre Dame beats what we thought was a better Georgia team, outlasted a very physical Penn State team, and obviously Ohio State ran through the teams they did and didn't play their best game on Friday night, found a way to win against a very capable, very talented Texas team. So, like them or not, these 2 teams earn their right to play in this national championship, and either Ryan Day or Marcus Freeman, for the first time, will be able to say they're national champions.
Crazy. Marcus Freeman, the Bears want to interview him for the head coaching job. I'm sure an extension's in the works for Ryan Day at Ohio State. If you told me this a month ago, especially with Ohio State, I would have been shocked.
Well, these are 2 teams that we both left for dead at points, right?
Oh, yeah.
When Notre Dame loses to NIU in week number 2, you can't. There's no way you can recover from that. They're in the national championship. When Ohio State loses to Michigan, this team's dead in the water. And I was one of the ones that said that, and now they're playing for the national championship as well.
I'm telling you, man, I think that Northern Illinois win over Notre Dame, if Notre Dame wins the title on Monday, that might go down as the greatest upset.
That they might claim national champions like UCF
did
that time.
Oh yeah. Because hey, that's a big win right there.
Why not? We'll talk about just how good these playoff semifinals were and where they rank all time in the history of the college ball playoff that we've been doing for a little over 10 years now. That's coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Veltri along with you on your Monday in the game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyra and Jack Veltri along with you here on your Monday on the game. Mine are coming up on Wednesday. Got men's basketball as they take on Vanderbilt. Pre-game coverage starting at 5:30 for a 6 o'clock tip here on 107.5 The Game in Columbia, as well as 100.3 The Game in Myrtle Beach, as Coach Paris' crew looks for their first conference win of the 2024-2025 season. Going back to Friday night and Thursday night now with the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl officially in the books. Both these games really good, really entertaining. Obviously came down to the very end where, of course, Notre Dame kicks the game-winning field goal with Mitch Jeter with a couple seconds left, and then Jack Sawyer gets a scoop and score right around the 2-minute timeout there at the very end of the game to secure the win for Ohio State. In the history of the college ball playoff, and again, this is the first year of the 12-team format, we haven't had a lot of really close games. More often than not, it is a blowout. And I think it did the percentages before we got into this 12-team playoff. I think it was 30-ish% of games were a one-score or closer. For the most part, they've been routinely dominated by one team or the other. So in terms of what we saw on Thursday and Friday, where do you feel like these games in the history of the college ball playoff over the past 10 years kind of rank all time, in terms of maybe a top 5 list?
Oh boy, I don't know. If the Cotton Bowl didn't have the Sawyer touchdown right there, I think that game would have just been all right. It was a good game, but it's not your upper echelon. I really do think the Orange Bowl though is the game where I think that's a top 5 playoff game because the way it became a shootout in the fourth quarter and you have Mitch Jeter kicking the game-winning field goal, that's a great game right there. But there have been a lot of great playoff games over the years. You have, the Rose Bowl from 2018 with Oklahoma, Georgia. That's got to probably be number one, unless I'm missing one. There's a lot of different games over the years. You have Ohio State, Georgia from the Peach Bowl. So
if you're compiling a top 5 list,
yeah, if I'm compiling a top 5, I'd probably put that Rose Bowl from 2018 at number 1. I feel like that Peach Bowl with Ohio State and Georgia has got to be in there, and this is in no particular order. I would put the Orange Bowl in there somewhere. Trying to think, any other games that you feel like have been really, really good over the years?
So I went back and kind of skimmed through that Michigan TCU Fiesta Bowl.
That was a great game.
Was a great game. Very high scoring game, back and forth. Like you mentioned, that same year, the Peach Bowl between Ohio State and Georgia, very high scoring. Obviously came down to the very end. Last year's Rose Bowl, went into overtime. I don't know if it is in the same echelon as those other ones. And then we've actually had a couple of pretty interesting national championships too. I think back to both the Clemson-Alabama ones, or the first 2 Clemson-Alabama ones in 16 and 17. You had the high-scoring one the first year that Alabama won, and then you had the 31-28 game in 2017, or January of 2017. That one was really good to me. And I know, Clemson won, so most people here are, not necessarily fans of that game. From an entertainment standpoint, that game was phenomenal. And you had Hunter Renfrow with the catch in the end zone at the very end to secure the win.
Yeah, that was one of the best games, I think, in playoff history. Definitely one of the top national title games. I agree with you, though. Those first 2 Alabama-Clemson games, the one from Phoenix, the first year that they faced off, that onside kick changed the entire game. And, Kenyon Drake having the, kickoff return touchdown, that was just insane. But yeah, look, I'm looking back at some of the other playoff games to kind of jog my memory a little bit. We got to remember how many times there were some real lopsided games in these early playoff games. Mm-hmm. We had the first year. It was Alabama-Ohio State was a very underrated playoff game from that first year with Zeke Elliott on that long touchdown run to kind of seal the deal in a real shootout. But you also had Florida State getting blown out by Oregon, and then you had Notre Dame the few times they made the playoff getting shellacked around by Bama, Clemson, etc. I feel like once you had that Rose Bowl with Oklahoma and Georgia. That's where things really started to heat up, and you had a lot better games every single year with the playoff.
You know what game I completely forgot about until I was looking back into this last night, and it's one that really doesn't get talked about. The 2019 Fiesta Bowl with Ohio State and Clemson. Like,
that one does not get talked about.
That is a game that I feel like we just completely ignore, right? That we don't even hardly talk about. Clemson obviously won that game and proceeded to get their doors blown off by LSU in the national championship, but that was actually a pretty darn entertaining Fiesta Bowl.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, anyone who's going to play LSU that next game, whether it was Ohio State or Clemson, I think LSU was just a team of destiny at that point. I mean, they were so good, and just Clemson was still in the midst of their dominance because they were coming off the national title a year before when they beat Alabama pretty handedly, and they still had Trevor Lawrence and stuff. I mean, this is a very good Clemson team at this point in time. That is one of the better games. That probably gets a little bit forgotten about.
Yeah, but again, when I think about what we saw on Thursday and Friday to kind of bring us back to the main point here. I think Thursday checked all the boxes of entertainment value to me because you had two, I'd say, pretty evenly matched teams. You had a good, grinded out defensive kind of first half. You had an offensive explosion in the second half. You had huge moments like the the interception and all that kind of stuff that ended up setting up Notre Dame for the game-winning field goal. I would probably put that above Ohio State and Texas. And again, that game was competitive all the way through and gridlocked for a lot of it, either tied or sitting at a one-score game until Ohio State was able to break away there at the end with the Jack Sawyer long touchdown. But I'd put the Orange Bowl a little farther ahead, but it'd probably be, I don't know, maybe fourth in my top five.
Yeah, I think about fourth is probably right. I mean, I think, about fourth. It was just a much better game to watch, I think, compared to the Cotton Bowl. Not saying the Cotton Bowl was not a good time to watch. It definitely was. But seriously, once you get to that fourth quarter and it's the team's just, I mean, it was a 17-14 shootout in the fourth quarter with how many points were scored in the final 15 minutes. And you had the penalties that were called and stuff. And the fact that, Penn State turned the ball over right before Mitch Jeter got to kick that field goal. I mean, that was an awesome game to watch and one of the better ones to really kick off these semifinals.
And hopefully we'll have an entertaining national championship coming up next Monday, which we'll break down as the week goes along. Also had NFL playoffs getting kicked off this weekend. We'll dive into some of those games and what we saw on Saturday and Sunday. Coming up next, it is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Feltry on your Monday here on The Game.
Big play here. Trying to go up top for it.
He wants to run for it, Jim. He wants to just go get it with his legs. He's trying to find
It
the
wasn't
opening.
there, so now he's got to throw it deep to the end zone. And was that caught? Yes! Ty Johnson scrapes it off the ground, above the ground for the touchdown.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher along with you here on your Monday on the Game. That was calling CBS over the weekend, or yesterday specifically. Buffalo Bills cruising to a pretty easy 31-7 victory over the Denver Broncos in the AFC wildcard to punch their ticket to the divisional round. I know Denver hit the long play early in the game for the touchdown. I never thought they really had a chance to beat the Bills. I thought the Bills were too talented. I thought Bo Nix going on the road for his first ever playoff start, especially in Buffalo, he wasn't going to be able to overcome that.
Yeah, that first drive of the game, the scripted drive, was very impressive to say the least. Like Denver taking shots right out of the gate on that long touchdown pass was crazy. And the fact that it was, the Bills secondary got cooked on that play. But I will say, I thought this game was going to be a lot closer. Seriously, the Bills, they've typically done pretty well in these wild card games as of late, and Sunday was no exception to that. But yeah, man, I mean, look, as soon as the Bills got that 10-7 lead, and then they went to halftime with the field goal that doinked off the upright. I mean, that kind of set everything in motion because you get the ball back to start the second half, and then you score, and then it's like, all right. Once they're up by 2 scores there, it's like, all right, this game's probably getting to be out of reach.
And look, Denver has a pretty decent run defense, and Buffalo ran all over them. James Cook, 120 yards. Team as a whole, 210 yards. So that sets up pretty well for the rest of the playoffs, especially going up against a Baltimore team who will get here in a moment that's at times struggled on defense this year. Yeah,
there was so much made in this game about the battle in the trenches at the line of scrimmage with Denver's defense having a great season. I think they had 63 sacks this season, but then you had the Bills' offensive line that gave up the least sacks this season. So it's 2 immovable objects right there, and one of them is going to crumble at some point. And I thought the Bills definitely won the battle at the line. I know Denver had a few sacks here and there, but to only give up 2 on the day and to rush for as many rushing yards as you did with James Cook and Josh Allen running when he needed to, I thought that was the difference in the game. And that 4th and 1 play, the one that we just heard there, the pass to Ty Johnson, that was a great catch, number 1. But that was the backbreaker, I think, for Denver to have any chance in this game.
I don't know how he kept his foot up.
I don't know either.
Out of bounds.
I don't know.
When I saw it in real time, I thought he was out of bounds. And I think it's one of those things that if they'd called it out of bounds on the field, it might have been hard to overturn.
Sure.
They called it a touchdown on the field, and you go back and look, I'm like, he barely did, I guess.
Yeah. That was insane.
And yeah, again, a 24-point victory, pretty easy for Buffalo. That sets them up for a matchup next weekend as they take on the Baltimore Ravens, who made pretty easy work of the Steelers on Saturday night.
Yeah.
It looked like a movie clip. When
They obviously cleared the protocol. They get their 2 big stars back. Meanwhile, there goes Henry. There goes Henry all the way for the touchdown.
Al Michaels on Saturday night on Amazon Prime as the Ravens pick up the victory 28-14 over their divisional rival. If I would have told you going in that the Ravens were going to run for 299 yards, you probably could have figured out they were going to win the game, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, when you have Lightning McQueen, Derrick Henry rushing for 186 yards. I mean, the dude is literally unstoppable. And here people are questioning at the beginning of the year, his age and stuff and all that. But Derrick Henry is he's on a different planet this season. And I think he has been so good for Baltimore. He's the missing link to what they've needed all this time. And then you have Lamar running for 81 yards on the ground. The fact that they ran all over this Pittsburgh defense, it's not really a surprise. The Steelers have been an absolute mess the last few weeks here. Now finishing the year on a 5-game winning or losing streak. I mean, look, the Ravens, they should have, they did what they had to do. And, I mean, it was a very impressive game for them, 28-14. And, it sets up, I think it's probably the premier matchup of the divisional round next weekend.
So this is going to be the, 6th time that Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson have gone head-to-head. And it's kind of funny because this is almost kind of like the inverse of the Bills Chiefs dynamic when you've had Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes, where the Bills have owned that game in the regular season but not been able to get past them in the playoffs. The Ravens have owned this series in the regular season. Lamar Jackson has 3-1 edge over Josh Allen, but in the playoffs, the Bills won the only matchup they played prior.
Yeah, they played back in, I think it was 2020. It was the COVID season, and that was a good game out in Buffalo where, Lamar threw a pick six, and that was kind of the backbreaker there in that game. But look, for the Bills, this game's at home, and we remember earlier in the year when the Ravens, I think it was like week 4 or 5, they absolutely demolished Buffalo out in Baltimore. It was like a 35-10 game. I mean, Derrick Henry running all over them that game, and that's kind of the issue. I think the thing I worry about most with this Bills team is, can you stop Derrick Henry? Because I think, look, you either have to slow down Lamar in the run game and make him beat you with his arm, or you have to slow down Derrick Henry. And if I'm picking one thing the Bills probably need to prioritize, obviously try to get both, I would say Derrick Henry, because Derrick Henry, I mean, look, no one's been able to stop him really at all this year, and the Bills haven't either, even going back to his Titans days. But if Derrick runs for 150 yards and a touchdown or two, I mean, the Ravens are probably going to win this game no problem.
It's really interesting because I mentioned, the Ravens have had troubles on defense this year. The Bills have also had troubles on defense as the year goes along. This could be one of those games where you might want to end up having to take the over, because we could see points galore on Sunday.
For sure. And I thought the Bills did a pretty good job after giving up that early touchdown yesterday of kind of keeping things in check and playing very solid on defense. Like, Denver only ran for 79 yards on the ground and really couldn't get much going through the passing game. That said, Denver is nowhere near as good as the Ravens are. But if you're able to kind of figure out how to contain Lamar and Derrick Henry, and we'll see if Zay Flowers is available this weekend, but I really do think the Bills have the weapons on offense to match up, even though Lamar probably has a little bit more help than Josh in this whole MVP debate. But I think if it comes down to anything, who can make one more stop, I don't know which way I'd be able to go.
We'll break those games down as the week goes along. That'll do it for hour number 1 of the Extra Point. Coming up, hour number 2, myself, Sam Shapiro, on your Monday here on The Game. Tyler Head here once again telling you about our friends over at Twin Peaks. Been talking about all this great football, and there's really no better place to take in all this great sports action than with our friends over at Twin Peaks, whether it be football as playoffs are rolling on, or whether it be basketball as conference play is underway, hockey is happening. We're only a couple weeks away from baseball getting underway, and all those sports you can take in with our friends over at Twin Peaks. TVs as far as the eye can see, tons of delicious food, and of course, those 29-degree draft beers. Nobody does happy hour quite like Twin Peaks. Whatever your preference, they have everything from tequila cocktails and extensive bourbon category to top-shelf spirits, cocktails served over ice balls, local craft beers, and handcrafted whiskey cocktails as well that round out their adventurous drink menu that's truly second to none. Never a bad time to get down to our friends at Twin Peaks over in the Vista. 10 o'clock, hour number 2. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Ed here along with you on your Monday. Sam Spiro hanging out as he does each and every Monday. I imagine the weekend for you was probably more interesting than most doing the job that you do, considering the fact that we had winter weather making its way in on Friday. And, we sat here looking out the window. Didn't really have anything here, but around Columbia, a lot of snow.
Yeah, I was running around Chapin a lot because I know there were some actual flurries hanging around, I think, Friday morning. But I thought it was very ironic that I moved here from the Northeast to try to run away from this type of weather, and somehow Mother Nature landed it on my doorstep somehow.
Well, I know you haven't been here for a long time, but you will learn. We could go, and I'm talking about the entire Southeast in general, legitimately like 2 to 3 years without any snow whatsoever. But when it snows, it's a lot. And if it's not a lot of snow, it's a lot of ice. And that's what really screws things up for everyone because, and nobody can drive on ice, right? That it creates enough of a problem, and it just stays for a couple days. And fortunately, everything, at least here in the Midlands, passed through pretty quickly. But seeing the collective panic from everybody leading up to it was a very familiar sight for me, given I've lived here in the Southeast my entire life.
So I went to school in Ithaca, New York, which is very close to Cornell University, and it was always just every winter the hill that we went to school on would just absolutely freeze. So it was very refreshing to not see a lot of the roadways freeze, kind of like how that was, because I just remember in college skidding down the hill every single winter, and kind of just seeing that the temperature was right above freezing the entire time. I was like, well, I'm not going to skid today. So that was honestly kind of really, it made it a lot nicer.
Yeah, and see, by mid-afternoon on Saturday, whatever was around here in the Midlands was gone, and it was a normal weekend, just kind of cold after that.
Oh, yeah, the sky was blue, and with the sun, it was nice out, so.
Yeah, so that, fortunately, I know the upstate got hit by a lot of it, but fortunately nothing much happening here in the Midlands. Allowed us the opportunity to enjoy the rest of the weekend, whether it was watching football or watching basketball. And we watched a lot of basketball this weekend, and one of the most anticipated matchups of the entire year for Dawn Staley's women's team was number 5 Texas coming into town. And given the fact that Carolina had already lost a game to UCLA, that Carolina had consistently been getting off to slow starts, even through the start of conference play, I think we were all worried this could be another one of those games where Carolina could find themselves in a hole and the talent level of Texas would have been too much to overcome. That did not happen because they took them to the woodshed from the jump.
Yeah, it sounded, or just watching the game, it kind of seemed like they followed their, standard formula. This team really, I feel like, comes into their own in the second and third quarter, but in this game, it was really more the first half. They kind of got out to a strong start a little bit earlier than they usually do. But the shooting from Pow, and then you had Sanaya Fagan stepping up as well. That really, really helped, especially in this matchup. And they were kind of in the driver's seat the entire way through. It didn't really seem like Texas had any momentum at any point in the game.
So Texas is obviously a very talented team, top to bottom, much like South Carolina is, but the key player for them is Madison Booker, and she's the one we kind of zeroed in on, going into the matchup. And, if you could take her away, then you could be successful. And they did a good job of that right out the jump and throughout the entire game. She ends up with 7 points, most of those coming up later in the game. 3 of 19 from the field. She started 1 of 14. If you can force the best player on another team to be 1 of 14 shooting to start out with, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah, and if you could pinpoint, a player like that is, impartially responsible to 2/3 of the team's offensive efficiency, if you can take a piece like that out of the game, you could completely dismantle a team and make the number 5 team in the country look like, just another team in your schedule. And, kind of watching this game, it almost kind of looked like that at certain points of the game. You even had Joyce Edwards getting some good buckets down low as well. It was a whole team effort per usual.
One thing that does kind of stick out on the stat sheet, though, is South Carolina did commit a high level of turnovers throughout the game, as they did turn the ball over 22 times. Coach Staley did talk about that a little bit after the game about having bad turnovers, but also just making good shots.
Yeah, and it also helps.
It's all about taking good shots. I think you can have a night as far as having as many turnovers as we had. With taking good shots. You lose games taking bad shots. And for us, we're finally getting to that point where we're taking better shots and we're taking rhythm shots. And it's paying off for us, especially in a game like this.
And when you look at the box score after the game, South Carolina 26 of 51, 51% from the field, 12 assists on those 26 made buckets. So like Coach Staley said, and we've seen this kind of come and go as the season has gone along, yeah, you want to limit the turnovers. But when you're making good shots and forcing another team like Texas to take bad shots, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, when you're shooting over 50%, I mean, you can't necessarily complain. It also helped they had 42 rebounds in this game. I mean, could help if they crashed the offensive glass a little bit better, 6 to 36 on that front, but 42 rebounds. I mean, when you're rebounding like that and you're shooting over 50%, it's going to really help your case. They also had multiple players. They had 3 players in double figures. So when you're spreading the ball out pretty well, shooting pretty efficiently, and you're crashing the glass, I mean, that's a recipe for success, even with 20 plus turnovers.
And as we talked about coming into this game, you were obviously going to be without Ashlyn Watkins once again as she got hurt. The other weekend against Mississippi State, didn't have her against Texas A&M, didn't end up being a problem. But you saw in the A&M game several of these women step up, and not it wasn't one of them replacing her. It was several of them playing key roles defensively, scoring, all that kind of stuff. And you saw that once again on Sunday against Texas. Joyce Edwards, another 10 points. Chloe Kitts, 11 points, grabbing 6 rebounds. Sanaya Fagan, whose defense was questionable at times earlier on in her career, stepping up. She got 9 rebounds in this game. You're just seeing blocking shots. This team's doing really well at that. Like, you're just seeing everybody step up to some degree or other to fill that hole for what was probably your best player, Ashlyn Watkins, no longer being out there.
Yeah, Bree Hall, even just another name too. Just like so many players coming off the bench, just filling in. Not necessarily filling the void that Watkins was, but just bringing what they can offer in terms of their skill set to the table to help the team continue to move forward. And I think that's why we see time and time again, even when you take some of these major pieces out with this team, you have other players, other pieces that can kind of fill in to keep the boat going.
And, of course, Carolina showed they're not invincible by losing that game to UCLA a couple of weeks back. But when you look at how they performed against Texas on Sunday, yes, they still have several tough matchups coming up over the next couple weeks, Alabama, Tennessee, LSU. If they can play like that, I don't know if there's anybody out there that can beat them. Again, we thought maybe losing a game early would be the right, proper wake-up call to get this team kicked in gear. And Don Staley alluded to it after the game yesterday as well, that there's just something about when they play these big-name teams. When they play these teams that have a number next to their name, especially a single-digit number, they go out there and play their best basketball. And guess what? You're going to have a lot more of those as the year goes along, especially once you get into the tournament.
This is definitely going to be a big confidence booster, I think, for this team going through the rest of the season. I know they typically play high-level competition like this, and it's probably nothing too crazy. It's maybe a star or a sticker date on on their calendars, but it's definitely got to instill some confidence, at least going into the rest of the season.
Speaking of instilling confidence, the men's basketball team did come up short on Saturday, but fared a little better than they had in the first 2 conference games.
Zach Davis will be the trigger man. They'll put Wright and Conyers on the near side of the court. Ugasuk on the far side, and Murray Boyles back at the other end. They'll throw to Murray Boyles. He leaps, he tips to Ugasuk. He lets the 3 fly just off the iron. No good, and that will do it. Gamecocks got themselves a pretty good look. They got what they wanted, but it's not enough. And number 2 Auburn comes away with the hard-fought win, 66-63.
Of course, disappointing to come up that short against what was then the number 2 team. We expect to be the number 1 team in the country in Auburn here when the new top 25 comes out. But compared to what we saw in the first 2 conference games against Mississippi State and A&M, a night and day difference. You're down 2 starters as well. Miles Studi and Jamari Thomas both going to be out for the while with their respective health problems there. But man, credit to Coach Paris's team. They came out, they fought for all 40 minutes of that game. We didn't see that in the first 2 conference games, but they went out there and put it all out there on the line. And again, it sucks that you came up short. You're still 0-3 in conference play, but we all feel better about this team now, I feel like.
Oh, my gosh. It's like you said, night and day. When we were talking about Mississippi State last week, we were talking about field goal percentage and rebounding. And in this game, the rebounding, like Murray Boyles wasn't the only player crashing the boards. Pringle was helping him out. Ugasuki was I thought he was very helpful off the bench, despite shooting 3 of 12 from the field. Having him have to step up in this game was huge for them. But, they also shot 25 of 61 in the game throughout. So just having that more consistent clip and actually having help on the boards kept them in contention with the number 2 team in the country.
And you also saw the emergence of a guy in Arden Conyers, redshirt Fred, 4 3-pointers in that game. That's somebody that we've heard a lot about that has a lot of promise and potential. He went out there and really showed that on Saturday, in addition to a guy like Colin Murray Boyles playing his best basketball. We talked about that with the first 2 conference losses, where Murray Boyles had 11 total points between those 2 games. He was getting beat up. He was getting pushed around. It looked like he did not belong out there with those guys. Saturday looked like he belonged. Saturday, you saw that aggressiveness. You saw that intensity that you needed because, again, this team goes as Colin Murray Boyles goes. And if he's scoring 25 points, you're going to have a chance.
And to his credit, he's usually forced into matchups where he's playing a guy that's usually bigger than him. He's more built, I think, like a 3-4, but he's usually forced to match up with a 5 9 out of 10 times. So the fact that he's coming out of a game like this, 25 and 7, I mean, he's forced to he's kind of been forced to toughen up, especially down low. And in this game, he really, showed up to the party.
And I know people might point fingers at the fact that Janai Broom was injured in this game. That did not happen until the second half after the under-16 timeout. Before that, Carolina was doing a really good job of keeping him in check. They were not letting him have a Janai Broom type performance. And again, trying to take positives away from something that did end up being a loss. You're taking away their best player. You forced Auburn to play your brand of basketball. Auburn's a team not as fast as Alabama, but they want to run up and down the court. They want to score a lot of points on you, and Carolina drug them into the mud in a sub-70-point game, which is what they were doing last year to a lot of teams. I think they held the most teams under 70 points in all the SEC. That's the recipe to success, and we saw some of that on Saturday.
Yeah, and, they were making some really deep, tough shots. They were running some alley-oops off the pick and roll, but I mean, South Carolina, especially at the end of the first half, had the momentum going into the second half of play. They were starting to almost it seemed like they were starting to pull away a little bit going into halftime, but then Auburn kind of came in guns blazing, and it kind of slowed things down, at least for them a little bit. But I mean, it was like you were kind of alluding to in the beginning, being very promising. It was very promising seeing that team almost kind of pull away at the end of the first half.
Yeah, and again, still 0-3 in conference play. Now you head on the road to take on Vanderbilt and Oklahoma this week, which is not going to be easy because any road environment in the SEC is tough, as we've seen through the first couple weeks of conference play so far. But a little more optimism going into this game as opposed to if Auburn want to come in here and blowing them out by 40 or 45 points. I think you have a lot of people that, I said this earlier, were on the fence about this team. Like, well, you dropped 0-3 in conference play and your average losing by 30 points. Oh, well, maybe next year. But now you see something. You see a little inkling of hope there that maybe they can turn things around. You still got to win a lot of games in conference, be around that 500 mark if you want to make the tournament, but still 15 games to go, and hopefully this is a spark of something to come.
And when you have a matchup like this against one of the best teams in the conference, I mean, this next 3 in-conference game stretch with Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, and Florida, I think it's going to be they're going to be a little bit surprised just because, the difficulty of these 3 matchups are going to be significantly easier, at least compared to what they were just duking it out with.
Again, the men's team back in action on Wednesday, taking on Vanderbilt, 5:30 tip, or 5:30 pregame for a 6 o'clock tip here on the game in Columbia, as well as 100.3 the game in Myrtle Beach. We'll take a look back at the college football playoff semifinals here from the winning and losing coach on Friday night in the Cotton Bowl. Coming up next, it is the Extra Point. He is Sam Shapiro. I'm Tyler Head on your Monday on the game. Well, welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. It's our head along with you. Sam Shapiro hanging out with me on Mondays as he does each and every week, as we are 1 week away from the college football playoff. What I'd seen out of them, where again, the talent on that team is great, but they'd not played up to their potential a lot of times this year. Even in games they won, didn't play their best football. They took Ohio State to the limit, but at the end of the day, Ohio State made more big plays, and that ended up being the difference at the end of the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah, Ohio State did kind of what they did in their last matchup. They came into this one guns blazing. They carried a lot of momentum going into the first half, but it was really that scoop and score that kind of solidified the dagger and everything. But like you said, hats off to Texas for, sticking it, for staying in the game for the most part. I mean, it really came down to the last 2 minutes of the game.
Let's hear a little bit from Ryan Day on some of those big moments that happened in the game on Friday night.
Yeah, I agree with Will. I mean, that was a huge swing, moment in the game. That and Jack's play really were two big moments. I thought the drive that the offense had there, when there was some momentum swings, and we talk about it a lot. When you have momentum, you got to keep it. When you don't, you got to go get it. I felt like we turned that momentum with that long drive. I don't know if it was 16 plays, but it was a bunch of plays. The one that finished with Quinshawn's 1-yard run, and then they kind of went down the field. We took a stand there at the 1, and then Jack's return was huge. But the screen, we were laughing a little bit in the locker room, having some fun with it, because we do screen drill. And I think sometimes, these guys are like, are we ever going to call a screen? And I actually said to the coaches, I said, we're going to stop doing screen drill because we don't call any dang screens. And so sure enough, what do you want to run? You want to run the ball? You want to take a knee? I said, no, just run the screen. They're like, all right, you sure? Sure enough, it went the whole distance, went for, 75, first play.
And again, going back to those big plays, he alludes to what happened right before halftime with Henderson and the 75-yard touchdown that gave Ohio State the lead going into the half. And then, of course, what happened with Jack Sawyer there at the very end of the game. And, again, I think Steve Sarkisian's going to be kicking himself this entire offseason for that sequence there, because you had 1st and goal at the 1. And you missed on the first play, trying to run up the middle. You went toss sweep on the second play. Sets up. By the way, you're in 4-down territory. Now you're going to have 4 shots at this thing, and you only end up running up the middle once. You're put in a position where you have to pass. And then Ohio State's pass rush, which you've been getting after Quinn Ewers all night long, forces the fumble. And, of course, Jack Sawyer runs it back in and secures his place in Notre Dame history. For as well as Texas played up to that point, it all fell apart there in the final 2 minutes.
Yeah, and even with, the pass rush, it seemed like the pass game for Texas was kind of the only thing they could really get going on offense in this game. I think if they could get something going on the ground, it would have looked a little bit differently, but they still managed to keep the game fairly competitive, very exciting, to say the least. But, I mean, if you take that scoop and score away, it's still only a 1-score game. So it was very close back and forth throughout the entire game. But I think Ohio State, like you were saying, struck when it mattered. And the fact that they came out guns blazing and they kind of ended the game with that bow on top was really just, it kind of kicked Texas in the dirt a little bit.
And I think Ohio State showed you how dangerous and deep they are, because everybody's talking about coming in this game, Jeremiah Smith this, Jeremiah Smith that, and rightfully so, as he torched Tennessee and Oregon in the first 2 games of the college football playoff and legitimately looks like the best wide receiver in college football. And if he could get drafted in May, if he was old enough, he would probably go in the first round. They took him away. They bracketed him. He had 1 catch for 3 yards. But here's the thing about Ohio State. They have a ton of other talent at receiver. Carnell Tate, Emeka Egbuka, those 2 guys combined for 130 yards, 12 catches, no touchdowns. That was Henderson's getting the only receiving touchdown there. But they have the ability to kill you in multiple ways. Okay, take away our best player. We got 2 guys that are not at his level, but not far off either. So they're very hard to slow down. And as we kind of look ahead to the national championship coming up on Monday, Notre Dame, very good defense, going to have a very tall test containing all those weapons that Ohio State has.
Yeah, well, they'll have film on those weapons, but the latest film they'll have on Jeremiah Smith is from Oregon. So I think to Ohio State's advantage, showcasing that that laundry list of talented players they do have, at least in the wide receiver room, it's definitely going to make Notre Dame's going to spend a couple extra nights in the film room, just because they're going to have to, I guess, either try to determine how talented all of this talent is or what talent they're necessarily going to go to. But sidelining Jeremiah Smith, holding him to maybe only a catch and 3 yards was I think a very tactical move by Ohio State.
And again, we're a week away from this game. A lot of time to break down all the dynamics of it. Ohio State, the overwhelming favorite as of right now, favored by 8 points going into that matchup. And I lean that way too, just because I think they are the most talented team in the country. When they play up to their standard, they're almost impossible to beat. But, man, Notre Dame has shown me a lot of things on defense these past two games, specifically against Georgia and against Penn State, two very capable teams that were worthy of being in the college football playoff, compared to maybe an Indiana that was up for debate, certainly, of what they'd accomplished up to that point. I think this should be another fun game, hopefully. And look, I don't cheer for either one of these teams. I don't care if Notre Dame or Ohio State wins. Two polarizing programs nonetheless. I just want a good game. And I think these two teams, one very good at defense, one very good at offense, are capable of giving us that.
Oh, they definitely will. I think Notre Dame's defense especially showed that they're going to at least pose some barriers to this Ohio State team, even if they come in guns blazing. I mean, they completely dismantled Drew Allard in that game against Penn State, and even though Nick Singleton and Tyler Warren did have some respectable performances, I mean, Notre Dame stayed in that game, which I thought was very interesting. And the fact that their defense kind of kept them in the position that when the time was right, they were able to kind of solidify the win and walk away with, I think it was that go-ahead field goal. Mm-hmm. It's going to be very exciting to see if Ohio State can come into that game against this defense the way they have in these last two matchups. Because, I mean, what really sealed it for Ohio State was they came in with basically an exclamation point scoring drive to start the game, and then they maybe had one or two more unanswered scores after that. So when you have that as your recipe, I mean, I'm kind of looking at it like Denver, Seattle, when we had like the really good offense versus the really good defense that one year in the Super Bowl. I think it's gonna give a lot of that kind of energy.
Yeah, it should be. And again, we got an entire week to break this matchup down, but should be a fun one. And we're gonna see a coach in either Ryan Day or Marcus Freeman be able to claim their first ever national championship. And again, in a 12-team playoff format, again, as controversial as some of the teams that got in were, you can't deny the fact that both Notre Dame and Ohio State earned their way to be here, both beating very quality teams in the process and looking very impressive in doing so. So, again, I don't have a rooting interest either way, but I think we could be in for a fun game next Monday.
I definitely, both teams have a great reason to win, and for Ohio State, I hope they win for my cousin's sake, but for Notre Dame, it'd be a great win for that franchise too. So seeing either team win, there's incentives to boast, at least for me.
Again, that's coming up next Monday night to claim the first ever 12-team playoff national champion. Of course, NFL playoffs went on this weekend as well. Had some interesting performances, some games that were kind of duds, and some downright disastrous quarterback play. We'll dive into that coming up next. It is the Extra Point, Tyler Head and Sam Shapiro, along with you on your Monday here on The Game.
Herbert, pump, throw, intercepted. Eric Murray, pick six, touchdown Texans.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Sam Shapiro along with you on your Monday here on The Game. I can't think of a better candidate for Who Sprung a Leak, brought to you by our friends over at American Leak Detection, than old Justin Herbert. Came in having a pretty great season overall. 23 touchdowns, just shy of 4,000 yards, only 3 interceptions. Well, he tossed 4 of them on Saturday en route to the Chargers losing to the Texans 32-12 in the AFC wild card. By the way, 32-12 is a scoregami, which I'm always going to get excited about.
How could you not get excited about a scoregami? We love a good scoregami.
Absolutely, and a playoff one at that. I mean, a disaster class from Herbert in quarterback play. And look, the Texans played well and certainly won the game with what they were doing offensively, but I mean, gosh, a complete meltdown by the Chargers on offense.
Well, I mean, when you look at it, at least when you look at the matchup on paper, it kind of looks like they weren't really spreading the ball offensively at all. Ladd McConkey's pretty much got all of their receiving yards.
And most of that was on that one monster catch and run.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I don't know what Houston's defense did to adjust to Herbert, but, you know, it's also Harbaugh's first year with this team kind of going into the playoffs. I'm honestly kind of surprised that they even kind of, well, I'm not surprised that this was kind of the outcome, but the fact that they kind of were in it at least at the half was a little bit surprising to me.
Yeah, and look, again, these two teams both deserved of being in the playoffs, obviously, and the Chargers, when you're playing in the same division as the Chiefs, you're probably going to end up having to go on the road to a very capable Texans team that, you know, won a very weak division in the AFC South. And again, the story of this game is going to revolve a lot around what Justin Herbert did wrong, but I want to talk about what like C.J. Stroud and this offense did right. C.J. Stroud had the big run, I think it was right before halftime, that helped set them up to get into field goal range, to help them, you know, go into the half with that 10-6 lead. It leads them on a 99-yard drive late in the game to score as well. Like this is not as efficient as it could be. They've dealt with injuries. Obviously don't have Tank Dell, but man, CJ Stroud is a baller. And CJ Stroud is a winner. You saw that going back to his time in college at Ohio State. And now they unfortunately get the pill of drawing Kansas City, which is not going to be easy by any means. But man, I do like this Texans team a lot.
It was nice. It was refreshing to see the pass play work well, just with the injury bug that wide receiver room has caught this year. You mentioned Tank Dell, Diggs out for the year as well. I know my fantasy took a bite from that, but to see Nico Collins come out with 7 catches, 122 yards, and a score was pretty refreshing. And then Joe Mixon has been nothing but a great addition to the Texans' run game. So it was honestly kind of nice to see C.J. Stroud kind of almost find a little bit more of his older self a little bit in this game, more of a rookie version of him versus, you know, the sophomore slump kind of version we've seen this year. So, I mean, he's playing good football at the right time.
Speaking of poor quarterback play yesterday afternoon on the NFC side of the bracket, Green Bay falls to Philadelphia 22-10. Jordan Love, 22 of 33, 3 interceptions in this game as the Packers just couldn't get out of their own way, it seemed like.
Well, at least on the offensive front, it was Josh Jacobs ground and pound in that entire team. It was almost kind of giving of the Raiders team he came from, just because when he was there, they didn't really have a quarterback either. And it seemed like because of how Jordan Love was playing this weekend, it was almost like they didn't necessarily have a quarterback. But I don't want to necessarily bash Jordan Love either, because it didn't really seem like either team's quarterbacks were completely competent, you know, locked in and were their usual selves. So I think it was a very run-dominant game. And I think Barkley got the last laugh.
Well, that's the thing, because, you know, both Jordan Love and Jalen Hurts, the last time we saw them, and both got nicked up. Jalen Hurts had the concussion 2 weeks ago, didn't play the last regular season game, and Jordan Love had the elbow injury when they were playing the Bears at the end of the regular season. So neither guy, I think, came in 100%. Obviously, both those guys able to play, and I don't know if that's the reason why Jordan Love played so bad, but he was very clearly shook, and it's kind of funny. It was like a complete 180 of what happened last year, right? Because last year, Green Bay had to go on the road to Dallas, and they completely dominated the Cowboys in Jerry World. Dak Prescott looked rattled in that game, and now the shoe's kind of on the other foot where Green Bay goes out there, and again, you throw interceptions, you miss field goals, just a ton of missed opportunities for a game where their defense played pretty well for the most part. I mean, Saquon Barkley didn't eclipse 100 yards until that last run of the game. I mean, and not that they didn't necessarily hold him in check, but he didn't run all over them like he's done to so many other teams this year. Jalen Hurts, didn't have the most impressive game at quarterback, and Dallas Goedert did a lot of the heavy lifting on that touchdown, that he was able to toss there. But yeah, when Jordan Love throws 3 interceptions, that's going to lose you the game.
Yeah, I mean, just even looking at this on paper, you could tell both quarterbacks were not themselves. I mean, I've never seen Jalen Hurts throw for under 150 yards in a game, even though he brought home the 2 scores. I knew something was not right just because 131 yards for any quarterback is usually not a great game. And then Jordan Love, 3 picks. I mean, that's also not very Jordan Love or Matt LaFleur either. They keep a type ship on the offensive front, at least going through the regular season. So it was kind of upsetting to see that both quarterbacks didn't really weren't hat-slinging slashers this weekend.
The nightcap for the weekend, still have a game to go tonight between the Rams and the Vikings, of course. On Monday Night Football was the Washington Commanders going on the road to Tampa Bay, and this is how it sounded in the end.
From 37 to send Washington to the Final 8. Washington Commanders off the upright, and it is in! They doink their way to the divisional round! Unbelievable!
Mike Tirico on the call last night at NBC Sports. Quickly, I don't know if something's changed with goalpost. I feel like the doink sounds are more of a thud now than an actual, like it used to be like more of a ding kind of sound. Now they're just kind of like thuds. I don't know what goes into that.
Yeah, I don't know if they're making the goalposts more hollow or if they're using a different kind of alloy or metal or whatever, but I agree. I think it used to be more of a ding, but more now it's more of a ding.
Yeah, and that was what ended up helping out the Commanders there as they drove down the field, hit that last-second field goal to win the game 23-20. And this was the Jaden Daniels show. Washington could not run the football the entire night, and Daniels was able to escape and get 36 yards on the ground, but the run game was ineffective. He had to do this with his arm, and he picked apart that Tampa defense all night.
Yeah, Tampa's run defense is legit, and Mike Evans made it a very tough night for that Commanders defense as well, but it was just very the big kicker for me was just how Jaden Daniels was so calm in the pocket just throughout the game. He looked very relaxed, and I think that really just helped him make a lot of great throws. There were even a lot of times he got pressured, and he had to dump it off to Eckler, and what would look like a 2-yard gain ended up being 15, 20 yards and totally kept the drive going. It was just very funny to see their first playoff win since 2005 come from a doink. And the ball doinked into the right side of the upright. So that was refreshing for them, but I felt bad for Cody Parkey.
I thought this game was going to come down to Washington missing on 4th downs because they're the most aggressive team when it comes to 4th downs in the NFL, and they routinely were going for it in the red zone last night. And, of course, they've had a lot of kicker situations this year, so I can understand not having the most faith in your kicker. They were very clearly sacrificing 3 points multiple times in makeable range throughout that entire game. And when they missed it at the beginning of the 4th quarter, they go on this long drive, 12 plays, 67 yards. They turned the ball over at the Tampa Bay 4-yard line. So right there.
Yeah.
Washington's down 17-13 at that point in time. If Tampa drives down the field on a long drive and scores a touchdown, they make it 24-13, and that might be an insurmountable deficit to come back from. They force the turnover, get a touchdown themselves. Yeah, Tampa's able to go out there and score the field goal to tie the game. But again, a rookie quarterback in his first ever playoff game on the road, none less, leads them down the field for a game-winning touchdown. I mean, if this guy's not already Offensive Rookie of the Year, I don't know what else more you need to see.
Yeah, he was legit, and I think the biggest thing for Daniels in this game, too, was his pocket presence was unbelievable. Just how his running and just using his mobility, just staying in the pocket, created different throws, different angles, letting receivers kind of continue their route just maybe a second or two longer would create completely different pass plays. And sometimes it didn't work because they would show replays where they'd be like, see, he waited too long and now the play doesn't work. But he was just very. The IQ on this young man was very exciting to watch. And even though they came up short on fourth down, I think at least 2 or 3 times in that game, that was, I mean, it could have been 6 or 9 points they could have had, like you said. And even ending the first half, the Buccaneers had so much momentum off that score. The Commanders kick a field goal, then Tampa goes and scores again. I mean, that was a tough game for Jaden Daniels to come in and debut as a rookie in the postseason, and he did a really great job.
And now, next weekend, we will get the Commanders going on the road, take on the number 1 seed Lions. You want to talk about 2 teams that love going for it on fourth downs? There may not be a punt or a field goal in this entire game.
It's going to be a really exciting game to watch, but, initially I would have said because the Lions are a little banged up, Jaden Daniels could give them a run for their money, but I think most of the country is pulling for this Lions team right now just because of what they went through and the level they're still playing at.
And look, making the playoffs with, Jaden Daniels in his first year is an accomplishment in and of itself. If you won a game, that's a lot to build off of, even if they do get eliminated by the Lions this upcoming weekend. One more game coming up tonight. We'll talk about that on the other side, as well as Lamar Jackson's interesting comparison for Derrick Henry. With that coming up next, wrap up today's edition of The Extra Point. It's Howard Head and Sam Shapiro on your Monday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. It's our Ed and Sam Shapiro along with you on your Monday. I want to let you know the Winter Indoor Golf Tournament, the first annual Pro Swing Golf Classic, is coming. It's a 2-day event on January 30th and 31st. $150 to register a two-man team. Bookings are available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Food is included. You can also win $1,000 for first place, $750 for second, and $500 for third. Plus, we're drawing Gamecock baseball tickets that someone can win just by registering. If you want to sign up for the first annual Pro Swing Winter Indoor Golf Tournament, give Pro Swing a call at 803-528-1617. That's 803-528-1617. Final game of the first round of the NFL playoffs, the wild card round, coming up tonight between the Minnesota Vikings and the Los Angeles Chargers. Of course, this game has been relocated from SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles to State Farm Stadium in Glendale, where the Cardinals play because of the wildfires going on out there in LA. I saw a lot of people saying that, you know, if my team's divisional rival wanted to come play in my venue, I wouldn't let them. Again, this is an extenuating circumstance, obviously a tragedy occurring out there in LA, where I think it's neat that the Cardinals were willing to give them the stadium. I'm sure proximity also had a lot to do with it, because I imagine some people would still be able to go to this game. I'm interested to see how many people actually show up for it, though, because, again, a last-minute relocation in a completely different state probably doesn't warrant a full house tonight.
Probably not a full house, but I'm sure a lot of people will still be there. I mean, it's going to be an exciting matchup, to say the least, and I think that, especially because you have two teams like this Rams team that's kind of found some resurgence towards the end of the season, and then you've had this Minnesota team that people have kind of been waiting to crumble almost all year, just because they've been expecting Sam Darnold to be a fraud, and he's shown time and time again how he hasn't been this year. I think it'd be exciting to either see the upset or Minnesota continue their dominance.
Yeah, well, that's what really stuck out to me about last Sunday night when the Lions and the Vikings were fighting for the number one seed, and the Lions just dominated them. Sam Darnold didn't look great. The entire Vikings offense was held in check. You know, Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson didn't have great games in particular. It's like, okay, was that a one-week anomaly? Because here's the thing, the Lions' defense has not been like elite this year. They've given up points, they've given up yards. So to hold what was then one of the best offenses in the league in Minnesota to 9 points really is glaring. It's like, okay, was that a one-game just anomaly, or is that who the Vikings are, and Sam Darnold is now going to fall apart like everybody you said was expecting him to at some point?
Well, it's not necessarily. I think if the Vikings do fall apart, it's not necessarily entirely on Darnold either. I mean, we've seen this franchise, I think, the last 2 or 3 seasons with Kirk Cousins and Dalvin Cook and other pieces kind of at the helm, and an even stronger defense than we're seeing this year, go 12-4, squeak out a season kind of like that, and then make little to no noise in the playoffs. So, again, I wouldn't necessarily be completely surprised if they choke, but, this year they've got some new pieces on the table, and I think they could make they could make a case for either.
And again, that game coming up tonight, the winner of that will go on to face the Eagles in the divisional round coming up next weekend out there in Philadelphia. I wanted to hit this before we get out of here. So Derrick Henry, again, just had a dominant performance on Saturday evening, rolling over the Pittsburgh Steelers en route to the 28-14 win for the Ravens. Lamar Jackson had a very interesting comparison for his teammate on what he reminds him of.
It looked like a movie clip. Like, when, I'm going to give Cars. You watch the movie Cars? You're a little bit too old to watch Cars, but anyway, for kids, I was a kid when I watched Kids. I was a kid when I watched Cars, that's all I'm saying. But, when Lightning McQueen just flashing past, and then it's like, that's how Derrick looked when he was running past, and all those guys it looked like a movie, bro. I'm not going to lie to you, but I'd rather be watching it than being on the opposite side of the ball. I know that.
It's really funny because Lamar Jackson's been in the NFL since 2018. He's been a full-time starter since 2019. I forget, I'm actually older than him. So I'm like 7 months older than Lamar Jackson. He was born in January of 97. I was born in June of 96. So when he says that resonates with me because I was 10 when Cars came out. I guess he would have been 9 years old. I wouldn't think to compare Derrick Henry to Lightning McQueen just because Derrick Henry's more of just a big bruiser. Obviously has the speed, but I don't think of Lightning McQueen as just big, bulky, and gonna hurt you type of thing. but I get where he's coming from.
Yeah, I don't know what Lamar Jackson knows exactly about winning 7 Piston Cups, but I do think there is one thing that all 3 of them know, and it is speed.
Yeah.
I think Derrick Henry is very fast. I wouldn't have necessarily said Lightning McQueen, but I definitely think it's a very funny comparison.
You remember the tractor Frank, or the whatever it wasn't a tractor, it was the big like crop
Yeah.
that they had to run away from when they were tipping cows.
Yeah.
I would have thought of something like that. Big, aggressive, and fast.
Right.
That's my comparison.
And unstoppable, and if you try to stop it, you're just going to get stiff armed.
Yeah, like he had to stop because there was a fence there or something like that. But yeah, how about former Alabama running back on former Alabama DB just tossing Mika Fitzpatrick like he was a dirty towel or something?
If I'm Saquon Barkley, I'm looking at Jalen Hurts like, where's my comparison? You're not going to call me, any of the other cars or Jackson Storm, the new one?
Listen, Saquon Barkley is great. Derrick Henry's a freak of nature.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody that big should not be able to run that fast and that aggressive, but he does, and I love watching it. It's so much fun.
I love watching a linebacker just completely dismantle. It's like watching a defensive prowess just completely run through defensive lines like they're running through a battlefield almost.
Yeah, and again, we're going to get a fun matchup next weekend. Bills and Ravens, 6th time Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen have squared off, and if things go well in Kansas City, then one of those guys is going to be playing Patrick Mahomes for the right to go to the Super Bowl.
I think either one of them actually has a good chance to knock him off the throne this year just because Lamar's got that second punch with Henry now, and Josh Allen is playing some of the best football he's ever played.
It's coming up next week in the NFL divisional round. That'll do it for today's edition of the Extra Point. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Monday here on The Game. 11 o'clock on your Monday morning. Welcome in. There's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark here on your midpoint of January, just about the midpoint. How's the snow, guys? Anybody actually get any snow over the weekend?
Snow? No, there was no snow. When I walked out, I think to come here last week, we had like the dreaded wintry mix, and then we had, I think it was technically snowing a little bit when I left, and I looked on my roof, and I had a little bit of accumulation that kind of looked like snow.
Looked like somebody dropped some sugar on your roof or something.
Yeah.
Mine looked icy.
Yeah, no sledding.
On my classic roofing roof. It did look nice.
If you have any damage from the, I don't think anybody has damage.
I don't think it got severe enough here. I can confidently say I never saw snowflakes. Saw a lot of rain. Saw some icicles, but that was
We did have
about
icicles. So that was the most exciting thing.
Well, no snow day here. A lot in the upstate, but missed here in the Midlands. And I was telling Sam in the last hour, of course, he's from the Northeast where they get snow all the time. I said, we go sometimes 2 to 3 years without anything. But when it does snow, usually it's pretty significant, and just kind of missed the Midlands this time, I guess.
We'll wait for next time.
And buy our milk and bread accordingly when that does happen. A lot of things to get to over the course of the hour. Obviously, college football playoff setting the table for the national championship coming next Monday. Men's and women's basketball, big games this past weekend, but maybe kind of flew under the radar. Some news on the transfer portal front, as there has been throughout the month of January so far, is South Carolina adding a little bit more depth on defensive line.
Yeah, Devontae Miles, Bowling Green, defensive lineman. And, I think this is one, if you were following us over on Gamecock Central, it had started to trend towards South Carolina adding him. We were tracking 2 guys, Terry Webb being the other defensive lineman. And, I would have been curious to see if South Carolina would have potentially taken both if they would have had the opportunity. But the more information we gained kind of going into last weekend, it appeared pretty obvious South Carolina was going to have a much better shot to get Miles. And, an interesting pickup, I think, for him, not the guy that has the high ranking as maybe some of these other guys in terms of the transfer portal rankings, but did have interest and was being targeted obviously by South Carolina, but also by Mississippi State, where he took a visit. That's a place that, I think felt pretty good about possibly landing him prior to him taking the South Carolina visit. And then Georgia was actually highly involved as well, was trying to get him in. Initially, the plan was for Miles to visit Mississippi State, South Carolina, then Georgia. But South Carolina obviously got the job done while he was on campus and went ahead and locked him in. So the Georgia visit never took place. But, I don't know quite as much about him, as a player. I think for Carolina, this is more about continuing to add some depth at that position, continuing to add guys who, like we talk about, have a chance. And, I think big bodies that can move, that's kind of what you're always looking for in the SEC. And as we've talked about, that interior defensive line is a spot where they have needed to add guys, and they do so with Devontae Miles.
I am very interested to see, because I'll be honest, we don't have an answer to this yet. Is he 270, 275 range, right? Because, on his Twitter X profile, says 6'5", 270. I think Bowling Green lists him at 6'5", 275. And so when you look at that...
Well, South Carolina on the tweet for him to sign lists him at 280.
280. Okay, so you got a 270 to 280 range. Good point.
It was after lunch.
That's right. So he's not a 300-pounder, okay? And so you look at that and you go, all right, defensive tackle, huge need, right? Is that a little bit too light? One thing that I noticed, because, some of these guys out of the portal, they'll commit, and you can find some film, like Rasul Faison. That was a gold mine, the running back from Utah State. He's got a, 10-minute highlight reel on YouTube. That's the gold mine. Some guys commit, and you're like, all right, we're literally going to have to go back and get on ESPN Plus, or if we can find the game on YouTube, and we're going to have to do it ourselves. We're going to do the old-fashioned
That's what I did for R.J. Newsom.
Yeah.
I watched his bowl. He played in his bowl game.
You're like, you're like squinting. Can I find, where's the left
my
guard?
guy?
Yeah. And Miles is someone that I have not gone back and studied all of Bowling Green's games, to be honest with you. But he does have a kind of a short highlight that he's put together on his profile. And one thing that I noticed, he plays some 3 technique at defensive tackle. Also for Bowling Green, they played some 3-man fronts where he's playing the 5 technique, so he's kind of in more of an end position. Now, you remember for South Carolina, in 2023, you saw a lot of the 3-3-5, the 3-man front. This year, because of their personnel, the defensive tackles that they had, plus the duo of Kyle Kennard, Dylan Stewart, et cetera, they played a lot more 4-man front. That was a question coming into the season that got answered pretty quickly. We saw them play a lot more 4-man front. Going into next year, they've got some personnel questions up front at linebacker, right? They've got some different skill sets from last year. So does Clayton White, and I don't know the answer yet, does he play more 3-man front? If so, I think Miles is a candidate. Maybe he slides out some. To me, he's got a little bit more of like a TJ Sanders-esque, and I'm not saying he's going to be as good as TJ, right? Don't put that on me. But he's got a little bit more of that body type. You know, TJ's a guy that some people think in the NFL could maybe slide out and play that 5 technique, that 3-4 defensive end type. Maybe, So I think we're still learning a lot about Miles. And look, TJ Sanders was 285, was his listed weight at South Carolina. And he was plenty effective on the inside. Miles, to me, looks like a guy that is one of those bodies who can come in, help you. He looks pretty quick. He's got some motor to him. He's got a little bit of versatility in terms of how you could use him up front.
Yeah, he's light on his feet, man. I've got this pulled up right now, and I can see why SEC schools, especially when, let's be honest, that's a position that is of value. You're looking for anybody who could possibly help you there. You're looking for, ultimately, we talk about traits a lot. You're going to struggle to play SEC defensive line if you don't have certain traits. And, I think you look at this guy, the traits are there, and then you just wonder, well, he's coming in mid-year. What can he do with, let's say, 9 months of strength and conditioning with this staff? Coming in from Bowling Green, a place that, I'm sure has good facilities, good coaches, all that, but it's not going to have the resources that an SEC school does in terms of putting some weight on you. I think it does speak to his upside that he did have the other SEC offers as well. So, I can see why South Carolina liked him. He actually was a Michigan commitment at one point in high school. And so I don't know what happened that, he dropped back and ended up having to go to Bowling Green. Don't know the backstory on that. But, a lot of times you are with these defensive linemen, you're looking at kids who are kind of raw as players, and you're just trying to identify, all right, do they have the measurables? Do they have the skill set to go play at the power 4 level? And, I actually think I think there's a good bit of upside here. We'll see, as with any of these pickups, we'll see what the word is we get once they start going through these workouts. But then even then, that only tells you so much, to be completely honest. You start to learn a little bit more once you start to get into spring practice. And typically, if you start hearing things, that's a good sign. Typically, if you don't really hear much about a guy, I don't want to say it's a bad sign, but that typically means, all right, maybe there's some ways to go here in terms of this being an instant impact. But, guys, there are several players that are in that same category. Xavier Hardy, the guy athletically is a stud. He's a freak. But what do we start hearing about him early on? Gabe Brownlow-Dindy. I don't know if you all saw these. They completely missed my radar when he committed. There are some quick clips of Brownlow-Dindy floating around Twitter from his time at A&M, not just the high school stuff. And good Lord, you see the flashes of why this guy was a 5-star type out of high school. It is it is insane how quick he can move at his size. So for a lot of these guys, it's going to be about, can Travian Robertson pull that potential out of them and turn it into production?
Well, and that, as you mentioned, brings you to 5 guys on the interior defensive line that have some form of experience: Barrett Goodwine, Hardy Miles, and Brownlow Denley, as well as bring in the true freshmen of Williams and Ingram. And out of all the spots on this team, again, a lot of spots being reloaded, does this feel like the one that's kind of the biggest open competition out of all of them? And again, it's a rotational spot where you're going to have a lot of guys getting the opportunity to play, but we really don't know what you have fully in that room really at all up to this point.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you're going to have competition at a lot of these spots, but in terms of just like shut your eyes and pull names out of a hat in terms of how it's actually going to play out, that's the one that most probably falls in that category for me and probably a lot of other people. It is going to be, I know we're sort of just getting into the offseason, and the actual college football season itself is not even over yet, but I think we have a fascinating offseason in store in terms of Carolina has once again, you can see how they've built out the depth on this roster. And really it's kind of across the board, but what is not clear yet is who is going to sort of, that kind of where you talk about the cream rising to the top, who is going to step up and take some of these spots. I was thinking back, guys, to what were our thoughts on this 2024 team before they kicked the thing off. And I remember thinking, man, they have some depth, but do they have enough difference makers? Do they have enough playmakers? And I'm talking offensive and defensive playmakers to win a bunch of games in this league. Come to find out, look at all these All-SEC and All-American and all these lists. They had playmakers at just about every spot at the end of the day. So can that happen again at multiple positions? Obviously, is something we're going to be talking about for the months ahead.
Absolutely, and we'll track it as it goes along as Carolina continues to add pieces in the transfer portal.
And I would say real quick, Tyler.
Yep.
I feel like we're kind of at the point, Chris. What are we tracking? One guy left in this portal window.
This window, probably.
One target.
Yeah.
Like,
Is that Cisse?
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
I did say that right, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
Now, there's always surprises. You never know. But in terms of guys we're like locked in on and tracking for this, it is kind of whittled down. This guy commits to Carolina, that guy commits elsewhere. Like you're sort of checking the boxes. We're kind of down for this window, kind of down to one guy to watch.
We'll see what happens with Brandon Cisse as he hopefully makes his commitment here soon. Friday night, we had the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic as Ohio State punches ticket to the national championship game take on Notre Dame. We'll revisit that coming up next as the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Monday here on The Game.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, you know what? It's our friends over at Firehouse Subs, our presenting sponsor here of the GC Takeover. Want to try something new? Check out this new French dip loaded with premium roast beef, caramelized onions, melted Swiss and provolone cheeses, topped with Italian seasoning, all on a toasted garlic butter roll, of course, paired up with that hot au jus. Perfect for dipping. To me, that's what makes this thing pop. That's what makes a French dip a French dip. If you're into those, give it a try today. You're going to love it. If you're not, of course, there's something for you on the menu at Firehouse Subs. Try them all like we do. And, of course, order with the Rapid Rescue. You can do that at firehousesubs.com, or hopefully you've already downloaded it. Downloaded the app today. Sign up. you're going to get points every single time you order. Almost lunchtime. Go ahead and put that order in today. FirehouseSubs.com or Firehouse Subs app. Rapid Rescue.
Pressure comes. Sawyer knocked it out and picks it up. Jack Sawyer headed down the sidelines. Ohio State 82 yards.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris along with you on your Monday. Chris Fowler on the call on Friday night at the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic. Jack Sawyer taking the forced fumble all the way back to seal the victory for Ohio State, 28-14 over Texas to punch their ticket to the national championship game next Monday to take on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I think West was the only one that picked Texas. I will say it was a closer game than I thought it was going to be, but also, like on Thursday night with Notre Dame and Penn State, a fun game all the way through, came down to the very end. And, man, what a moment for Jack Sawyer cementing himself in Ohio State history with that play.
Yeah, closer game than the score indicated as well.
That's right.
But, man, how about two just absolute, punches to the gut, kicks to the chest at the end of both halves for Texas. And first half, you hang in there. Really feels like Ohio State has the advantage in the game, but Texas is kind of chipping away. They hit the big play on the wheel route, and then you allow a first down screen play, and you can tell the announcers are sort of slow to be critical, but they're just like, dude, first down coming out in a kind of 2-minute situation, you see the draw or the screen all the time, but you zone blitz, basically, like you put yourself in a position to possibly give up a big play on a screen. That was bad. I would say the call that's getting the most attention, the play call that's getting the most attention, is obviously the run to the outside down there on the goal line. I think that's one of those that's very easy to be critical of based on the result. However, Ohio State has been outstanding in the red zone on defense this year, and you just saw them absolutely stuff you on first down. And Texas has been a team all season long that has tried to get their backs out on the edges. They've thrown the football to their backs. They've run sort of outside zone type stuff. And, getting the ball to the perimeter is a big part of what they do. That was even, I remember, y'all know I talk about Cole Kubelik in his podcast a lot this year. He's been talking all year long about, at times, how Texas does kind of get the ball to the outside, maybe even a little too much. But that's a big part of what they are on offense. They try to attack you at all angles. Again, it's easy to sort of crap on it now. I didn't have a huge problem with the call. Could you have just quarterback sneaked it in there maybe, but I do think there's no guarantee you were slamming the ball right up the middle on that Ohio State defense and scoring there.
Where was Arch Manning in that situation?
Ooh, good question. He did play a little bit.
Yeah.
Handful of snaps.
But not in a situation.
He got his bell rung earlier, though.
Maybe that was why?
Yeah.
I'm going to go back and look. I was trying to pull up some clips on YouTube and was served the algorithm served me a worst play call in history reaction video. I assume from a Texas fan.
Outside run?
Yeah.
On the goal line?
That's what he was talking about.
Yeah.
And that is a tough pill to swallow. I found the actual highlights, and somebody said, imagine you have one last attempt to tie the game, but your former roommate sacks you, grabs the ball, and scores an 82-yard touchdown to end the game. Did y'all hear what Jack Sawyer said after the game?
Yeah, he said,
Quinn came up to him.
Screw you.
Screw you, and laughed. That's tough. I mean, it is. I mean, to your point, Wes, this is an Ohio State defense that's been really good. They're really good in the red zone. You have the 1st and goal, and you have PI. So now you're even closer. And it is hard to fathom how you didn't get in there. I know Sark said after the game that if they had blocked it well, they probably score, which you can say about anything that you run down there. Caleb Downs made a great play. I'm looking at it, and I'm trying to erase Caleb Downs, which you can't really do, right? But I still don't think that play, I don't think he makes it in. There's a lot of traffic down there. The bottom line is if they get it in from there, nobody's really talking about that. That was a second down play call. You got plenty of other opportunities, And like we were talking about earlier, this game was a lot closer. It's a 2-score game, but, you've got first and goal on the 1 down a touchdown. And because of the strip sack, it's a great play. You've got him backed up. It's kind of desperation mode. Jack Sawyer makes a great play, and the ball kind of bounces the right way, and then he's able to run it in, so it ends up being, 2-score margin. But, to have first and goal and not be able to score in that situation, Texas fans are going to have a hard time dealing with that.
Yeah, it's a tough one to swallow, like you said. And look, this season for Texas obviously has been very successful in first year in the SEC, but when they've gone up against the best teams they played, 2 times against Georgia, obviously this game against Ohio State, just not quite enough. Obviously, the second Georgia game is closer than the first one there, but just not quite able to get over the hump. And I think we can say with a lot of confidence this is a Texas team that's routinely going to be in the mix for the SEC, for the college football playoff, and for the national championship. They just are kind of suffering from what we've seen a lot of programs suffer for over the years, not being able to quite get themselves back to the top there, as Sarkisian's still chasing the first opportunity to play in a national championship game as a head coach.
Well, and yeah, you're talking about the elite of the elite at this point. Ohio State, let's not forget, Ohio State has just rolled through this CFP until this game, and so Texas is right there. I think Ohio State probably was the better team, but in a different world, the ball bounces a little bit differently. Maybe there's a different outcome. So I don't know. I don't know if Texas is that far off at all from potentially being in the title, or if the brackets were even different, if they had to go ahead and, let's say, go through Penn State instead of Ohio State at this point in the bracket, are we having a different conversation as well? I think Texas, certainly more so as we saw than Oklahoma, has done a pretty good job of being prepared for what they were going to face in the SEC before they even got to the SEC. Like, you look at what they have up front on their offensive and defensive lines, they've matched up with pretty much every team they've played except for, maybe Georgia in terms of the trenches. So I think you look at that team, I don't think they're going away. Like, you look at that program, they're not going away. Obviously, it's teed up for Arch at this point, although I think you're kind of in one of those weird situations where Quinn Ewers has been really, really good for them over his career, and people are just like ready to move on because Arch is, and maybe Arch throws 50 touchdowns and it's, they're proven right. But this is a guy who's thrown for over 9,000 yards for your program and has thrown 68 touchdowns in his career. So that's most guys. They're like talking about where's his statue? Maybe not statue, but putting your name somewhere at least. Yeah.
No, definitely so. And again, they had the win last year before they came to the SEC over Alabama. Obviously, made the semifinals that year. This is the most successful run Texas has been on since the Vince Young years back in the mid-2000s. And Quinn Ewers is certainly a big part of that. And he does still have a decision to make on what his future is going to be. And if there's going to be a question to ask in Austin this offseason on who's the quarterback's going to be and what happens with Quinn Ewers after that. Quickly here, early lean, national championship, Ohio State and Notre Dame. What's the vibe a week out?
Quinn did tell the announcers he was not planning to play college football next year. So that's, I think, where your lean is there.
That can change.
We
saw last week.
I mean, Ohio State has got to be your favorite, I think, right now. We'll get into the game, but early lean for me.
Yeah, the way they're playing, it's hard to pick against them right now.
Yeah, I agree. 8-point favorite, and we'll break that game down as the week goes along. Some huge basketball games happening here in Columbia over the weekend with the women's game as they took down number 5 Texas yesterday. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Monday on the game.
All right, guys. Integrated Media, Michael, Nathan, their entire team, they can help you out with any of your home's audio-visual needs. Actually, run Pro Swing as well. We've been out there, too. So if you're out in Chapin, go check out the showroom, the Experience Room out in Chapin, 105 Snapdragon Court. You can go check out all the latest awesome audio-visual equipment and talk to the team at Integrated Media about how they can professionally install it in your home. Then go over and hit a few golf balls on the best golf simulator I've ever seen over at Pro Swing. They actually opened a new location over in Forest Acres, and we're going to be out there on Friday, 9 to noon. Come see us out at Pro Swing. IntegratedMediaInc.com is where you can go to learn more about Integrated Media, complete smart home systems, installing TVs, Sonos wireless speakers. Make sure your internet is in tip-top shape. Anything from an AV standpoint, they can do it for you. IntegratedMediaInc.com or 803-948-8327.
Raven will bring it in on the sideline in the corner. Gets it into Pow Pow. Pow Pow is going to launch a long three. Bang, got it. Three-pointer. Tahina Pow Pow with the big three, and the Gamecocks lead 25-15.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West, Chris, along with you on this Monday here on the game. There was a guy, Brad Muller, on the call yesterday afternoon at CLA as the women's team took down number 5 Texas pretty routinely, 67-50, to continue their winning streak as well as stay undefeated in conference play so far, led by Tina Pow Pow with those 11 points, 2 of those coming from 3 in a game that we kind of wondered, based on how Carolina's played this year, if they were going to get off to another slow start, find themselves in a hole against a very capable Texas team. Didn't happen, as they punched them in the face right from the jump, and Texas never really seemed to get their feet underneath them.
Yeah, great game for South Carolina, obviously, and I think, guys, the thing that stands out to me, too, is just the balance from Carolina. I mean, as you mentioned, when your leading scorer, you've got, Pow Pow with 11, Kitts with 11, you got Fagan with 8, Bree with 7, Raven with 8, Joyce Edwards off the bench with 10, Fulali with 8, Tessa with 4, just the amount of contributions you're getting from this team right now in terms of there was nobody who just kind of took over the game is really, I think, a good place for South Carolina to be in. They shot 80% from the free throw line. They shot 43% from three-point land. I mean, this was a complete team effort. I would think you would say a group that has actually benefited from their loss. Like, you kind of wonder how a team is, not that you ever want to lose, but you wonder how a team's going to react to losing. And ever since that UCLA game, they have taken their overall game to a completely different level. And you're just kind of seeing, I think, this team come together into what they are going to be. And obviously, you got to play Texas at their place later on, so we'll see if that changes the dynamics at all. But this was the number 5 team in the country coming into your place, and South Carolina just completely outclassed them.
Yeah, this is a really good team, Texas is. And this is what we talk about this a lot. This is why you can't take one loss to a quality opponent against UCLA and say, Gamecocks don't have what it takes this year, And they did this without Ashlyn Watkins, which they're going to be doing the rest of the year. There are several good teams in women's basketball, and I think from what we've seen body of work-wise from South Carolina is, yes, they are still good enough. They are still a championship caliber team. Obviously, we'll see, right? Because we've seen great South Carolina teams that look like the best in the country all year, not go win the championship before. So the thing is, what we've seen from this team this year so far, we're still early in this thing, but they have beaten how many top 10 teams now? 4, 5 top 10 teams. They have one loss. That Texas team, I mean, Vic Schaefer talked about it after the game. He continually talked about how he credited South Carolina and said we didn't look like ourselves. And I think South Carolina dictated that. I was actually at this game, and the interesting thing was the Gamecocks did not even play great on offense. They were at times a little bit out of sorts. I think they made some big shots, like Pow Pow made some really timely, just I'm shooting this, and drained it. They had some great passing, but they weren't as efficient as they could have been on fast breaks. And you credit Texas for a lot of that too, right? This is a really good team.
Turned the ball over 22 times.
Turned the ball over a lot. Offensive rebounding. Kyla Oldacre had 16 rebounds. I think 12 of them were offensive.
In like the first 5 minutes of the game.
Yeah. She would have like 4 offensive boards like on one possession.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that was frustrating.
That also means you're missing some shots.
They were missing a lot of shots. And that's something Schaefer talked about, Texas' head coach too. They missed some bunnies around the rim, but Carolina was contesting everything. And so I think when we think about South Carolina, we think about their ability to score, the depth. We think about Fulwiley with her flashy plays, which she certainly made some of those in this game. Pow Pow's outside shooting. But sitting there watching it the whole time, I was going, Carolina's defense is outstanding. Tessa Johnson did a great job. Bree Hall was outstanding on Madison Booker when she was on her. Fagan was really good defensively. they just battled from start to finish, like denying the ball, contesting shots. They made it really, really difficult on Texas, and I think that their defense is kind of what drove the entirety of their success in this game.
Well, and I'll go back to our conversation we had with Wellbaum on Friday where, we kind of looked at this stretch of the next 5 opponents all being ranked teams and the challenge they presented. And he said he thought Texas matched up the best with South Carolina. Now, again, like Wes said, you still have to go to their house a little bit later on in the season coming up in February, and that's going to be a challenge in and of itself. But, man, if that's the team that matches up the best with you so far in the slate and conference play, then, again, every game's different, obviously, but you feel pretty good about what you have as you take on Alabama, as you take on Oklahoma, as you take on LSU, as you go to Tennessee coming up here in a couple weeks. Again, this team really seems to be hitting its stride as the toughest games are coming up.
Yeah, and just the way they guarded Madison Booker, she's averaging basically 15 points a game, 6 boards a game. South Carolina held her to 7 points, but most importantly, 3 of 19 shooting. That's 16% on field goal percentage for her, and just basically took her out of the game essentially. And I think there have been a couple of other times, if you look at her splits, there have been a couple of other teams, especially getting into SEC play. She had 21 against Alabama, a huge night for her, but then Oklahoma held her to 8, Arkansas to 3, South Carolina to 7. So, it's been a little bit up and down for her. If she is on, Texas is very, very difficult to beat, but South Carolina doing a great job against her defensively. And, I think if you look at this South Carolina team, and Don't Say We talked about this too, if they turn the ball over, but they're still doing all the other things right, and they're playing great defense, and not that you ever want to turn the ball over, but their shot selection was really good. And so if you do all those other things, you can kind of mask your turnovers a little bit, I think. And so for Carolina to go do what they did, also I want to point out another great home crowd for South Carolina as well. The atmosphere, you had who was it? Jeff Goodman, the men's basketball national beat writer guy, was, I guess, in the house tweeting about, hey, this is an incredible women's basketball atmosphere. So we've come to expect that here in Columbia. But once again, shout out to the FAMs for giving that home court advantage.
Women's team in action coming up on Thursday, taking on Alabama. Pregame coverage at 6:30. Tip off at 7 on our sister station, 98.5 WOMG. Friday, by the way, we're going to be out at Pro Swing, new location, 4708 Forest Drive, all day long, 6 a.m., 6 p.m. Come by and see us for all of our shows out there. The men's team was in action on Saturday. Didn't get the W like the women's team did, but we came away feeling a little bit better about where this team is after 3 games in conference play. That's coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game.
45, underneath the basket. Pringle catches, gives back out top to Murray Boyles. Left side, Conyers. Conyers looks to drive, cut off by Baker Mazar. Gives to Murray Boyles. He'll drive on Broom, gets to the rim with the left hand, scores it. Murray Boyles feeds Pringle at the rim. Great fake. Got not one but two men off their feet. Stepped under them and got the easy layup.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West, Chris with you on this Monday. Derek Scott on the call for the Gamecocks Radio Network. A couple highlights there of Colin Murray Boyles, his performance on Saturday. Unfortunately, not quite enough to help South Carolina pick up the win over number 2 Auburn as they fall 66-63. But the team as a whole looked night and day better than what we saw in the first 2 conference games against Mississippi State and Alabama. That was led by Murray Boyles, who had 11 combined points in those first 2 games, went for 25 and grabbed 7 rebounds on Saturday. But again, just not quite enough for Carolina to be able to pull off what would have been one of the biggest upsets in program history.
Yeah, you feel bad for the guys, man, because they played their hearts out. The game was right there. And, really just, I feel like the end of both halves, Carolina struggled to quite execute to the level they needed to. And, I thought they let Auburn chip away a little bit at the end of the first half. And then, of course, the situation at the end and the 2 missed free throws, it's just unfortunate because this is probably one of the most difficult stretches of basketball I've ever seen to start SEC play. A team for Carolina that we knew was going to maybe have to kind of feel its way out a little bit when it gets into conference play. Now, I think what we saw on Saturday against another just loaded opponent was, I think, a sign. I think it showed us that this team can compete. And, now are they too far behind right now in conference play? Like the talk before was that if they can go 500 in conference play, you will get in the tournament just because of how loaded the SEC is. And you have quad 1 opportunity after quad 1 opportunity. So how does this team compare to some of the more middle ground SEC teams? We're going to find out, and I think they showed they can compete. Loved what Arden Conyers brought to the floor. You can see why. This is a guy that, you look back, Lamont Paris has been kind of quietly excited about who he is going to become for a long time. I think there's still some progress to be made on the defensive end, but that shot is fluid, man. That thing is pretty. So what will they get out of him? I think will be interesting to see where that goes moving forward. But you see both sides here. Great progress. But, man, you could be sitting at 1-2 right now with a just huge victory, and it just slipped through.
Yeah, I think – look, and they did that without 2 starters. So you got to keep that in mind.
That probably further tanked a lot of people's hopes for this game, seeing that news come out on, late Friday that Thomas wasn't going to be playing?
Oh, absolutely no chance and all that, right? Like, you play the games for a reason. And I thought CMB and Pringle, I know Pringle, and Pringle was great after the game. I mean, taking accountability for the free throws and all that. He was still really good in the game. CMB was outstanding. And we kind of know with this team, they're going to go where CMB takes them. I mean, fair or not, when he's on, Carolina's a tough out, when he's on. And he's more than capable of being on, as we've seen several times this season. Conyers, I really like, Wes. I agree with you. A smooth shot. You can tell, in the post, he's got potential there. He's got to get a little bigger. These are longer term things, right? But for the short term, fire away. You need him in there. You need him in there shooting with confidence, which it looks like he's got. You're going to need Pringle and CMB to be great. Obviously, the sooner you can get some of your other guys back, the better. But it was a step in the right direction. I'm not doing the moral victory thing. The close games aren't going to count for you. At some point, even though you've got wiggle room because of how difficult your schedule is and all the opportunities, the quad 1 opportunities, like you said, you are going to have to find some wins. And that's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for anybody, but particularly with this team being shorthanded, still figuring some things out. But can they make some progress during the course of the season? I think that's the key question.
Well, and I also kind of wonder, just from a pure mindset standpoint, when, again, you get getting blown out by 20, 30 points by your first two opponents, the fact that, you could go toe-to-toe with one of the best teams in the country. I know Janai Broome got hurt, but they were holding him in check up until that point. Anyway, as now you head on the road to Vanderbilt, you go to Oklahoma at the end of the week, that just your mindset is better. Like, hey, we've proved to ourselves and to a lot of people that we can do it. Let's go out there and find a win, because you really need to get one in these next couple games to get yourself back on track.
Yeah, I do think it speaks to a mental toughness that they came out and played the way they did after those two blowouts as well. Huge games coming up, though. Can they start to sort of chip away a little bit and get a couple dubs? By the way, did Bruce Pearl ever go check on his guy at all?
Nope. I noticed that, too. He never walked over there.
I don't even think he stopped when he was, walking by him to go to the locker room. Unless
didn't look like it.
They completely missed it. It did not appear that he checked on him once.
One of the best players in the country, certainly the best players on Auburn's team. Weird.
Well, weird.
That's a bad. If he didn't,
I kept waiting on him.
That's a bad look.
I was wondering the same thing during the broadcast. What is this guy doing?
Yeah.
You don't even go just tap him on the head and love you, man. I
don't know. That's Bruce Pearl, I guess. That'll do it for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs Halftime Show. Myself, Terry Ford, up next on your Monday here in the game.
What do you want to do here? I'll tell you about our friends over at Krantz Cooling and Heating. That's Krantz with a K, cooling with a K, Krantz, cooling.com, 803-672-3224, or KrantzCooling.com since 1983. Krantz Cooling, their family-owned and operated, locally owned and operated business, has been helping families, residents, and businesses all around the Midlands. Check out what they can do for you at KrantzCooling.com. It's obviously really cold right now in the Midlands. You want to make sure your heating system is running at tip-top shape. They can do it for you. You can join the Krantz Club, which gives you peace of mind, knowing that your home's heating and cooling system is going to get regular professional attention. They've been to my home. I trust them to go to my mom's home in Irmo. You can trust them too. Justin Krantz, shout out to him, general manager over at Krantz Cooling and Heating. 803-672-3224, or go to their website, KrantzCooling.com.